This is part 3, the concluding part of our 3-part series on ADHD. That is Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. You know, let's have a little session here where I kind of break it to you. There are kids who struggle with their learning. Now, it may be their fault because they're too busy picking their nose or flying an airplane, whatever. No, I'm being facetious here. But sometimes a kid is not in control. Like I've talked about in a previous episode, pediatrician programs, having teachers teach with fidelity in their awareness of the developmental thinking levels of the children that they teach, man, that's you packing a powerful punch. Not only is that research based, it's one of the highest yielding achievement practices that you can employ in a classroom. Recognizing the layers of thinking, the abilities of thinking, what can prevent good thinking, enhancing that thinking about thinking, that metacognition. Look, you can do big things when you think about thinking. And then you're like, oh, come on, man. Let's get back on topic. Let's do it. It's kind of funny. This episode is called ADHD, and here I am just meandering in the forest. Let's talk right now. What happens if a kid is diagnosed with ADHD and they actually have their medication? And so I'm going to be talking about the fact that when a kid does not have medication and they're in your classroom, they're already at a disadvantage of approximately 90%, 90/100ths, 9/10ths of a disadvantage in the effect size based on the control or the quote-unquote neurotypical, typical student, whatever that is. Now, what happens if that child has a diagnosis of ADHD and they are prescribed medication and they take their medication as prescribed and it's not yo-yoed with for whatever reason and they're taking it with fidelity? Folks, this is where we get into the green. It is research-based, tried and true, proven. Dr. John Hattie hit a grand slam on this with his conclusive research. When a child is taking their medication with fidelity and they have been diagnosed with ADHD, Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, they can experience or expect to experience a growth of 32%, 0.32 on the effect size. Now, you may not be shifting or dancing or praising Jesus about that because it doesn't seem like that much. But let me tell you something right now. That's a huge difference in not having your medication and having your medication. Try to prove me wrong, because look, there's different strokes for different folks. There's different things you can do to try to enhance a person's life. There's different mechanisms, different medicines, different tools we can use. But what do you have to say? What can you speak to when there's a difference of 122% in possible effect that can't be had, can or can't have, when a child is taking their medication with fidelity and when they're not taking it with fidelity? What can be said about that? What can we do as teachers to best advocate, to best represent the students that we're teaching to the parents who are governing their medication? You have to be very sensitive. If you are a follower, a listener of the BOWTIEGUY podcast, I've got some really seriously bad news for you. A great many of you are not qualified. You're not psychiatrists. You are not qualified to make a diagnosis of ADHD. I'm sorry to break it to you. Kid may be acting goofy, whatever. You do not have the quality. You do not have the qualifications. You do not have the esteem to make that designation. Leave it to the experts in the field. Now, I'll tell you this right now. We can recognize that a child learns differently, but who in the blue moon of Kentucky are you to ever condemn a child by saying, oh, they can't learn, he has ADHD? Look, we are all of one accord, one team, all for one for all. We need to be looking out for the interest, the best interest of all of our students all the time. Now, let's get back on topic to what to say to a parent when you know that something ain't right with their medication. You need to be very sensitive. Luckily, within the last 4 years, my diagnosis, my life with medication has given me somewhat of a, credibility, if you will, with the parent in a conversation, with my fellow teachers, with my administrator. It gives me a voice, or I guess a voice of esteem, because I experience it. I kind of sort of know what I'm talking about. Now, I'm not qualified to diagnose diddly squat, but I'm telling you from experience, I can give you my experience, and experience has been a fantastic teacher for me. But I have to be sensitive to the parent, because you don't want to assume anything, because I hate to tell you, assuming makes you know what out of you and I. And if you need to know what, go look it up. Don't assume anything. Sometimes a child has a custodial agreement between two parents that have separated, that have divorced, and that's where a chasm is happening with their medication. You know, the best medicine for conflict is communication. That's what I've learned. Honest and sincere communication. So many teachers that I've had the experience of working with, and I hate to be negative here, but they like to jump the gun and assume that parents have something to do with it. Like, no, it's just a topic of conversation that needs to be had. I can't tell you how many forms I've had to fill out, how many registries, how many exams, assessments, surveys to evaluate a child on a perceived diagnosis of ADHD or ADD. And they want my expertise in the experience that I have with that particular child in governing their designation as to whether or not that child has ADHD or not. I've filled out so many of those forms, and I fill them out honestly, based on what I see, what I observe. And, you know, is weird, because I do have a frame of reference here, and I do kind of have a little bit of a conflict of interest as well, because I mean, I like to think that all kids learn differently. All kids, look, different strokes for different folks. But I know that medicine works. It works for me. And I would venture to say, and though I'm not an expert, it works for a lot of people. Okay? And so I just think that everything's worth trying. As long as, you know, and there's some people that have reservations about children, students being medicated. Look, there's different strokes for different folks. I'm not saying there's a one-size-fits-all avenue that we need to pursue in reaching our kids, but it needs to be a topic of conversation. So you need to be sensitive to those parents, in addition to sensitive to the child. It's not their fault. Yeah, you can say it out loud. It's not their fault. Now, there's certain social behaviors or skill sets that, I hate to break it to you, we haven't acquired. Some of the most gifted, and we're all gifted, but some of the most academically enhanced and motivated students I've ever dealt with, they've had ADHD, and you're like, what? But see, and they have been holy terrors in terms of social interaction, social cues. That's just a skill set that they have not, I guess, had identified as a weakness, because they've been perceived and prescribed as so academically, quote unquote, gifted. We kind of look the other way at some of the other deficits, disadvantages, weaknesses that a child may have. I have loved the opportunity to teach students that are twice exceptional. And you're like, what in the blooming of Kentucky is twice exceptional? Oh, I just love it, because I'm kind of living vicariously. As I've told you in a previous episode, look, I've been tested for gifted as a student 3 different times, failed all 3 times. I'm not a failure. My performance, I assume, is a failure based on the expectations and metrics of a armchair educator, but I will tell you this. Look, I think that it is important to recognize the beauty in all of us. That we all, I think every person wants to do well. They have a commitment to themselves. No person intentionally tries to just fail because they love the taste of failure. No. Those twice exceptional kids that I'm talking about, oh man, they bring rainbow and sunny days into my life. And I'll tell you why. Especially when they're identified as gifted, and I know it's weird, but they're also identified as having a learning disability as well. Did you know it's plausible? It's possible. Anything's possible, but it's possible that a student, a child, may be gifted in math, but may have a learning disability in reading. Did you know that that's even possible? I think it's more evident than you're giving it credit for. I think that we just haven't recognized that. But I have loved the experience of teaching twice exceptional students where they have a diagnosis of ADHD, they have to take medication, but yet they have been identified as being gifted as well in a particular content area. I wish that we started looking at that more closely. Gifted in what? Gifted in tying shoes? Gifted in what? In the state of Georgia, we give 4 tests to assess the quote-unquote giftedness of a child, which I think is just absolutely fundamentally ridiculous. There's only one survey that is submitted, and that's just the survey from the teacher. Then you have a cognitive abilities test, which is just more or less like a standardized test. That's like your ITBS, norm referenced. And then you have a creativity test that, yes, I will tell you this, as I acquired my gifted endorsement as an adult, I failed the creativity test. And I'm loud and proud about it, because that just shows how stupid it is. As a 28-year-old adult, there I was in the middle. Well, I think most of the other adults in the endorsement class, they failed the creativity test as well. We took the same one that we give these kids. But look, an apple is an apple. If you show me a picture of an apple, I'm not going to tell you it's something else just to, I guess, sound smart. Yeah, I mean, it was weird. But experiencing that failure with a creativity test, look, I know I'm creative, but I don't need a test to tell me I am. But I've acquired that skill set, that gumption, that wherewithal in the context of my entire life, the marathon that I've lived throughout my life. Those twice exceptional, beautiful learners that may have ADHD and they're gifted, identified as gifted, man, that's awesome. That just shows that they can. What is a disability anyways? I think of a disability as like someone who can't breathe, or someone who can't eat correctly, or someone who has a physical problem that they cannot overcome. It is medically impossible for them to overcome. It's like telling someone who has diabetes, you don't need insulin. What? You can't tell someone who has diabetes they can't have their insulin. Their body chemically requires it. Now, just because my brain did not come with its prepackaged assortment like yours does not mean that I don't need to take my medication. ADHD is an enigma wrapped in a surprise box, wrapped in bubble wrap. We're still learning about it. And I can tell you that there's only been even incremental developments in the field of neurotypical versus autism spectrum disorders. All of this, ADHD, it's all an undertaking in the field of psychiatry and psychology, where we're learning about the brain. You know, you even have some schools of thought that even say that people who have been diagnosed with ADHD, well, it's evidence of human evolution. And you know what? I don't know, like spiritually, I'm not going to go there, but I'm going to go there in the sense that, yeah, I can see that. Because, you know, I like to think that my brain operates at a capacity that is a little bit different than everyone else. I'm not saying it runs better, faster, stronger. I'm just saying it is, I can tell you from experience, ADHD makes me a different cat. But I love this cat that I am. And, you know, we're all different. When we get to that place where we can accept the differences that we all have, but then accept the mutual goals and admiration that we could have with each other, hey, this world will be a better place. Thank you for tuning in with me to this episode of ADHD 3-part series. This is the concluding part. And you know what? It's time to take it to the hizzy. Hope you have a great day. Goodbye.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.